My presentation today to you guys is going to show you that the earth is very sacred and that our ancient ancestors millennia ago recognized certain lines of force, which we call ley lines, which I'll describe later, and more importantly, dragon lines. These are male and female currents of energy that entwine the globe, and ancient sites were sited upon them. So our ancient ancestors, your Celtic ancestors, recognized these energy patterns, and this is what I'm going to describe to you today, how Stonehenge is powerful because it's a power place, because it's sited upon these lines. I'll just try and get the first slide up. Yep, is it up? Yep. Well, here we have the lintels of Stonehenge that Dolores was talking about. I mean, these are gigantic stones. They're huge standing stones, and they've been made very smooth, their frontispiece. And even in the 1950s, as you can clearly see before you, they couldn't figure out how to put the stones up, so they hired cranes, and they hired people to do it. But Stonehenge's long and checkered history has always been said it's a healing temple. And the healing temple was renowned worldwide. People from Egypt, people from India, people came from Europe to travel to Stonehenge for healing. And this is one of the oldest depictions ever of Stonehenge. It comes from the 15th century, and it wasn't called Stonehenge to our ancient ancestors, it was called the Giant's Dance. And that's why the stones appear to be moving in this picture. And the Giant's Dance was said to be able to heal you. And it was be able to heal you if you stood upon a specific area of Stonehenge, which Dolores described as a vortex. And we're going to be having a look at that later. And our next slide should be of the standing stones of Avebury Henge. Just sited 17 to 15 miles north of Stonehenge, you have one of the biggest megalithic complexes in the world. It's called Avebury Henge. And the standing stones there aren't like Stonehenge, they're kind of rough and they're kind of ready. But this ancient site is said to be feminine, whereas Stonehenge, we'll find out later, is said to be masculine. And people go up and touch these stones, and they touch the stones in certain ways, and they receive energy from them. And I'm going to show you that with very sensitive electromagnetic sensing equipment, we can find anomalies in these standing stones. For example, the standing stone that you can see before you now, well, in a moment, hopefully. Let's go on. Yeah. The standing stones you see before you now have magnetic anomalies in them. So when you sit in certain chairs, and these are called megalithic chairs at Avebury and at other sites, you again receive the energy through your third eye. And the energy that comes into your body is all healing. And we're going to have a look at the color of earth energy, and we're going to look at the sound of earth energy as well, because we're in a critical moment in history. A lot of the speakers earlier were talking about angels, and they were talking about now is the time to listen to what the angels have to say. I'm the sort of person where I've been working with Gaia, I've been working with the earth energies, and it's time now that we listen to the earth. And in America, you have some amazing sacred sites, and this is called a mound, Monk's Mound in Illinois, I think. It's one of the largest mounds in the US, and this is said to be all healing, a bit like the energy sites in England. And the next slide I'll present is Woodhenge in America. And that's a kind of wooden version of our Stonehenge. And again, these sites were known to our ancient ancestors to be all healing. Now, I call the earth energies the earth force, because as we're going to see in the presentation now, the earth force is all powerful and it manifests in specific ways. And what you're probably familiar with is the term ley lines. I'm sure loads of you here today have heard that term. But what is a ley line? In England, we call ley lines a straight line that runs for more than 10, 15 miles and stretches over sometimes 100, 150, 300 miles. This is one of the UK's longest ley lines. It's called the St. Michael ley line. And it has numerous ancient sites sited upon it. Avebury, those standing stones I showed you earlier, is at the exact centre. And we have to see these energy lines as lines of force. They're magnetic lines of force that encompass the globe. Yeah, you have them in the States. You have them in Europe. Our ancestors saw these lines of force and they put the power places upon them to harness the energy. Now, in the 1960s, this ley line was discovered by an author called John Michell. In the 1980s, he asked two authors called Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst, very famous dowsers and sensitives, to douse the ley line, because Avebury cited upon it, another sacred site called Glastonbury, which Dolores was talked about, was cited upon it, to find out what was going on. What they found out was extraordinary, because ley lines aren't just ley lines. Encompassing, and if you imagine like weaving in and out of the ley line, you have two currents of force. One is seen as feminine, yin, and one is seen as masculine, yang. And these powers of force are literally contained by the ley line, and they're far more powerful than the ley line. In ancient China, these were known as lung mei, the dragon's breath, the power in the land. And whatever ancient site is cited upon the yin line has feminine characteristics, and whatever cited on the masculine current has masculine characteristics. So we can understand the sacred sites now in terms of yin and yang energies. In China, where these lines crossed, or where these lines met, was exceptional power, reserved for the emperor's tomb and palaces alone. In England, Stonehenge, Avebury-Henge, all our sacred sites are sited upon these yin and yang currents. We call them Mary and Michael. The reason why we call these energy lines Mary and Michael is because it's extraordinary. Every 5 to 6 miles on the Mary line, which is the current that entwines the ley line, was sited a church dedicated to the Virgin Mary or Mary Magdalene. On the masculine line and current, every 10 miles was a church dedicated to St. Michael. So they were called Mary and Michael energy lines. And they are vital. See them as the earth's arteries and see them as flowing rivers of light. And then the great megalithic sites such as Avebury-Henge in Wiltshire, like the slide shows you, the top slide shows you about sort of 500 standing stones in the shape of a serpent, with the belly being the stone circles of Avebury-Henge, and below that what Avebury-Henge probably looked like 4,500 years ago, with a few standing stones to give you an image of what Avebury looks like. And Avebury combines those male and female currents. And this is a map of the local landscape. You see St. Mary's Church on the Mary current. That means that church is full and imbued with feminine energy. They cross at Windmill Hill, which you see before you, and they co-join at Avebury-Henge. Yeah? So imagine these two female and male currents entwining the ley line. Well, people said to me, but Maria, is that just you picked them up with your dowsing rod? Are these energy lines real? And does the Earth Mother really emit these really strong arteries? So we decided, along with 2 experts from Oxford University, to test out the theory. And we employed some very deep copper rods deep into the central Mary line to see if we could get a signal. I'll just show you the next slide. Sorry, I have to go back. And what we found was amazing. We put the copper probes into the Mary line and we got 3 anomalous signals, which although they're very faint, you can see before you. And then the Oxford professor said, this is a kilohertz, which is really a frequency range that our ancient ancestors may have heard. Because roughly speaking, we hear around about 22 seconds per cycle in hertz. Well, the Earth force emits a cycle about 25 hertz. So perhaps our ancient ancestors at sacred sites like Stonehenge, like the pyramids, like Avebury-Henge, could hear the Earth force.